I tap the end of my pencil against the edge of the drafting table, the faint tick-tick, echoing through my office, like a metronome, marking time I can't afford to lose. Sunday has always been my quiet day at the firm. No calls, no meetings, just blueprints spread across the glass surface, and coffee going cold beside me. The restoration of the Fairmont Heritage Hotel should have felt like a triumph. After 12 years of climbing, scrimping, and signing papers until my hand cramped, it was supposed to be the crown on my career. But lately, every success feels shadowed by something I can't name. Maybe it's exhaustion, maybe it's family. The Hales never understood why I left home to build my own name. They called it selfish when I stopped putting "and family" on my first business card. I remind myself that I earned this peace, that this office, sunlight slanting through the tall windows, the scent of varnish and ink, is mine. The phone buzzes against the table, sliding an inch before I grab it. My cousin Ivy's name flashes on the screen, then vanishes as the call ends. Before I can set it down, it rings again. I almost ignore it. Ivy isn't the type to call twice, unless something's wrong. When I answer, her voice is a rush of panic. "Nora, are you looking at the family group chat? You need to check it right now." I hesitate, already bracing for the usual chaos. Birthday photos, passive-aggressive jokes about my corporate lifestyle. But as I open the chat, the air in my office seems to thin. My family is in the Fairmont Hotel. My project, my property. The photos come in a flood. My mother in the ballroom, arms open like she's blessing it. My brother Mark holding a clipboard. My aunt measuring walls. Even the younger cousins chasing each other across the marble lobby. A banner in one picture reads "Hale Family Holdings Celebration." My stomach twists. The captions sting worse than the images. Finally reclaiming what belongs to the Hales. Nora did such a great job fixing our legacy. For a few stunned seconds, I can't breathe. Our legacy. The Fairmont isn't a family heirloom. It's the product of every sleepless night I've had since 21. I dial Ivy back, voice trembling. "What is this? Why are they in my building?" She whispers, like someone afraid of being overheard. "Your mom said she found paperwork showing she's co-owner of your company. She brought the whole family there to announce it." The words blur. Co-owner. Impossible. I stand so fast, the chair scrapes the floor. "She signed off years ago," I say, mostly to myself. 8 years ago, when I was starting Hale Design and Development. She'd co-signed a small loan to help me build credit. I paid it back within 18 months and had her legally removed from every document. It's over. It should be over. But as I grab my keys and head for the elevator, dread settles cold and heavy in my chest. The drive downtown is a blur of traffic lights and disbelief. When I finally pull up to the Fairmont, the sight stops me cold. Balloons, catering vans, music spilling from open windows. My family has turned my project into a party. I push through the lobby doors, the air thick with perfume and champagne. My mother's voice floats above the chatter. "There she is, the woman of the hour." She walks toward me, cheeks flushed with triumph, arms wide. Behind her, a sign gleams on an easel. "Hale Family Estates, future headquarters." Every muscle in my body goes rigid. "What are you doing?" I ask, keeping my tone even. "Celebrating," she says, as if it's the most natural thing in the world. "You've done such wonderful work, sweetheart. And now it's time to bring the family back into what we started." Her eyes shine with rehearsed sincerity. "We," I repeat. "You mean the company I built from scratch?" My brother Mark joins her, smirking. "Mom showed us the paperwork, Nora. The LLC still lists her name. You didn't think you could just cut us out." My lawyer's number is already dialing before they finish. Eli answers on the second ring. "Get to the Fairmont, now," I say, voice clipped. They're claiming co-ownership. Within minutes, security appears at my request. Confusion, giving way to professional alertness, as Eli strides through the glass doors with his briefcase. "This property," he announces clearly, "belongs to Hale Design and Development, of which Ms. Nora Hale is the sole owner. I have the current filings and deeds here." The room quiets. My mother's smile falters, then stiffens. "Don't be ridiculous, Eli," she says sweetly. "I co-founded this company. That makes this hotel part of the family. Eli opens a folder and lays the notarized papers on the nearest table. Mrs. Hale, the documents you're referencing were voided 8 years ago. What you're attempting could be considered constructive possession and potentially fraud. Murmurs ripple through the crowd. My father looks away. Mark mutters something about family loyalty. I stay silent, eyes on my mother. She changes tactics instantly, voice softening into wounded disbelief. You'd rather embarrass us than share what we helped you build. The room watches, waiting for me to crumble under the guilt. I take a breath, steady. You didn't build this, I say quietly. You co-signed a $15,000 loan I repaid with interest. Every brick, every permit, every sleepless night after that, mine. For a moment, she just stares, and I see it. Not shame, but calculation. Then her expression hardens. You've forgotten where you came from, she says. No, I reply. I just stopped letting where I came from decide where I'm going. I turn to the head of security. Please escort everyone off this property. Effective immediately. The order ripples like a shockwave. Guests murmur. Plates clatter. The sound of protest rising and falling. My mother's voice cuts through it, sharp and cold. This isn't over, Nora. Family means sharing. When the last of them finally leaves, the silence feels heavier than the noise. The banner still hangs across the ballroom, sagging at one corner, letters peeling slightly. Hale Family Estates. I pull it down myself, the paper tearing loudly in the echoing space. Eli watches from the doorway. You handled that well, he says, but there's concern beneath the calm. They had access to internal documents. Someone must have given them copies of the old filings. I nod, staring at the shredded banner in my hands. They've been planning this. The realization is both terrifying and clarifying. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a burst of family greed. It was a calculated move, and if I hadn't caught it today, I might have lost more than just a building. I take one last look around the ballroom, the sunlight glinting off the polished floor I paid for, and feel something shift inside me. The shock drains away, replaced by cold, deliberate resolve. They think I'm just the girl who got lucky with blueprints and a loan. They're about to learn how dangerous I can be when someone tries to steal what's mine. 3 days after I had my family thrown out of the Fairmont, my phone became a battlefield. Every morning, I woke to missed calls from unknown numbers, emails from investors demanding clarity, and messages filled with words like concerned, confused, and reconsidering. At first, I thought it was just gossip, someone whispering about the so-called Hale family feud. But then I saw the post, my mother's smiling face, the ballroom of my hotel glowing behind her, captioned, "Heartbroken that my daughter cut me out of the company we built together. A mother's love should not be repaid with lawyers." My hand trembled around the phone. The photo was beautiful in the worst possible way. Perfect lighting, warm color balance, a crafted tragedy. Within an hour, it had hundreds of comments. Strangers offering sympathy, calling me cold and ungrateful. I scrolled until my vision blurred. The worst part wasn't the comments. It was how believable her story sounded. She'd always been good at that, turning guilt into a kind of art. By noon, my assistant Layla came into my office looking pale. The business blog picked it up, she said, dropping her tablet on my desk. The headline made my throat close. Architect Nora Hale cuts out family co-founder in 3M feud. The article was full of quotes from my mother's social media, plus a video clip. Mark had filmed our confrontation, edited, to make it look like I was screaming at her in front of a crowd. The part where she lied about ownership? Gone. The part where she called me selfish? Gone. Just me, standing in a ballroom, shaking with fury, yelling, "You didn't build this!" I looked like a monster. My investors started pulling out one by one. Polite emails about delaying pending due diligence. My banker, who'd always greeted me with jokes and coffee, now used stiff, formal language. Given the current uncertainty around company ownership, we must temporarily freeze further financing discussions. My company's reputation, the thing I'd spent a decade shaping, was collapsing faster than I could respond. And all of it came from a single false story, told by the people who were supposed to love me. When I called my lawyer, Eli, I was too angry to sit down. "They're not just attacking me," I said, pacing. They're destroying the company's credibility. He listened quietly, letting me spill the rage out until I was breathless. They're doing this because you embarrassed them publicly, he said finally. This is emotional for them, but they've crossed into legal territory now. Defamation, business interference, misrepresentation. I rubbed my forehead. If I start a legal fight, I look even worse. They'll say I'm suing my own mother. Eli's tone softened. And if you stay silent, their story becomes the only story. That was the truth I didn't want to hear. I'd spent my life trying not to become like my family. Loud, dramatic, addicted to attention. But silence was a weapon too. And right now, it was being used against me. I pulled open my filing cabinet, the one labeled Founding Documents, and began pulling out papers. Repayment receipts, bank statements, the notarized withdrawal letter. 8 years of proof that everything I owned was mine alone. Then we'll fight, I said. That night, I stayed in the office until the city lights blurred beyond the windows. I scanned every document, labeling them with dates and notations, building a digital fortress of facts. When I reached the letter from my mother, the one she signed acknowledging repayment of her original loan, I paused. Her handwriting looked almost fragile, looped and neat. I, Linda Hale, acknowledge full repayment and relinquish all claims to Hale Design and Development. I remembered that day, sitting across from her at the kitchen table. Her smile tight as she signed it. Just a formality, she'd said. You don't need to pay me back, sweetheart. But I insisted, because even then, I sensed that money from her came with invisible strings. I uploaded the document, then added copies of property deeds, tax filings, business licenses. Not a single trace of her name appeared after that date. The more I organized, the calmer I felt. Guilt was emotional. Proof was concrete. When I finally leaned back, exhausted, the Fairmont's blueprints lay beside the evidence of my independence. It struck me that my mother would never understand what this meant to me. Not the money, not the ownership, but the freedom. By morning, Eli had drafted a series of cease and desist letters. One to my mother, one to Mark, one to the blog that ran the story. Each word was sharp enough to cut. Cease publication of defamatory content, or face legal action. I hesitated before sending them, wondering if it would make things worse, if she'd twist it into another story about the ungrateful daughter suing her family. But when I refreshed the page that afternoon, the blog post was gone, replaced with a bland message. Content temporarily removed pending verification. My phone buzzed with a text from Eli. One down. 2 hours later, Mark's video disappeared from his account. My mother's post lingered the longest, her followers arguing fiercely in the comments. But then, sometime after sunset, that too vanished. I stared at the empty screen, a strange relief blooming in my chest. Not victory, not yet, but silence. The storm had lost its voice. For the first time in days, I slept without my phone on my chest. When I woke, the world was still. No calls, no headlines, just the quiet hum of the office and the faint smell of coffee from the hall. But silence can be deceptive. As I checked my inbox, new messages poured in, not from family this time, but from tenants and investors. Each one cautious but curious. We saw the retractions. Is everything resolved? Glad you stood your ground. We trust your leadership. The tide was turning, and with it, something inside me. This wasn't just about saving a business anymore. It was about reclaiming my narrative. My family wanted me to crumble under the weight of guilt and perception. Instead, I'd built a wall of truth around myself. Still, as I stared out the window at the Fairmont's gleaming facade, I knew this silence wasn't the end. They'd gone quiet too quickly. The Hales never lost quietly. Somewhere in the city, my mother was already rewriting her next version of the story. And this time, I would be ready to end it before she spoke a single word. 2 weeks after the post vanished, I almost believed the quiet might last. Investors began returning my calls, cautiously optimistic, and tenants at the Fairmont resumed sending rent checks instead of apology emails. But peace, I've learned, isn't silence. It's the pause before a louder noise. That noise arrived one grey morning in the form of a curious envelope, marked confidential legal notice. My stomach sank even before I opened it. Inside, printed on expensive paper, was a lawsuit, filed by Linda and Mark Hale versus Nora Hale. The claim: breach of fiduciary duty, fraudulent ownership, emotional distress. My own mother had sued me. I reread the names until the words blurred. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was how formal it felt. Cold ink, where once there were phone calls and hugs. The irony burned. She had spent weeks painting me as a heartless daughter, and now she was the one dragging me to court. I remember standing at my office window, watching the rain streak down the glass, thinking, this is what happens when blood turns to business. Eli was calm when I called him, as if he'd been expecting it. They're doubling down, he said, trying to force you into a settlement or a public apology. They think you'll crack. I didn't answer right away. I was staring at the photo on my desk, me and Mom at the ribbon cutting of the Fairmont, both in hard hats and matching navy suits. Her hand rested proudly on my shoulder. If someone saw that photo without context, they'd see a mother-daughter team, not the war that came after. We'll fight it, I said finally, my voice flatter than I felt. Eli sighed. Then you need to prepare yourself. This won't be about truth. It'll be about perception. They'll twist everything, make you sound like you stole what was hers. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. She's been doing that my whole life. I'm just done pretending it's love. That night, I took the photo frame off my desk, flipped it face down, and left it that way. The first hearing was surreal. My mother arrived in pearls and a soft grey suit, the picture of restraint, while Mark wore the smug half smile of someone who'd already rehearsed his victory speech. When the judge asked for opening statements, their lawyer painted a picture so warped it almost impressed me. According to him, my mother had entrusted her life savings to help her daughter launch a hotel that was meant to be a family legacy, and I had secretly excluded her once it became successful. They even produced old emails, ones where I'd called her my partner before the company was officially registered. Out of context, it looked bad. When Eli stood to respond, his tone was measured but unyielding. Your Honor, he said, we will show evidence that every cent loaned by Mrs. Hale was repaid in full, that she signed legal documents relinquishing all claims, and that Ms. Hale has operated transparently for 8 years since. I sat still, fingers laced, watching my mother avoid my eyes. When the judge adjourned for the day, she brushed past me, her perfume, jasmine, and something sharp, lingering like an accusation. After that, the press returned like vultures. Family at war over $3 million hotel empire. One headline blared. Another called me the heiress who cut blood for brick. They never mentioned the part where I built everything from nothing. The sleepless nights, the 3 a.m. drafting tables, the loans I took when banks laughed at me. To them, I was just a woman with sharp suits and no soul. Layla suggested I make a public statement, maybe a video explaining my side. But I knew better. Every word could be twisted, every tear weaponized. So instead, I did what my mother never could. I worked. I spent those weeks on the Fairmont expansion project, meeting engineers, reviewing permits, walking through half-finished rooms smelling of plaster and dust. The sound of drills and hammers grounded me. I wasn't a villain or a victim there. I was just an architect again. Sometimes, I'd catch workers whispering when I passed, their eyes flicking toward me with the kind of sympathy people save for tragic news. I didn't blame them. Everyone loves a scandal. Few love the woman in the middle of it. One evening, as I was leaving the site, I found someone waiting near my car. An older man in a dark coat, holding a small envelope. Ms. Hale, he asked, your mother asked me to give you this. My first instinct was to refuse it, but curiosity won. Inside was a single sheet of paper, her handwriting neat and familiar. You can still end this. Just give back what was ours, and I'll make the press go away. You know, I always wanted us to be on the same side. For a moment, I almost laughed. Ours. That word again. As if my work, my sweat, my years, had ever belonged to anyone but me. But beneath the anger was something else. Grief maybe. A small aching part of me that still wanted a mother, not a rival. I tore the letter in half, then again, until it was confetti in my palm. The man watched silently as I dropped the pieces into a puddle. Tell her, I said quietly. She already took everything that mattered. Then I got in my car and drove away before the tears could follow. The final hearing came faster than I expected. By then, we'd presented every document, every email, every payment record. My mother's side had grown quieter, her lawyer less confident. When the judge finally spoke the ruling, the court finds in favor of the defendant, Ms. Nora Hale. I didn't feel triumph, just an immense hollow relief. The evidence had spoken, but victory felt like ashes. My mother didn't look at me when it ended. She just gathered her purse, whispered something to Mark, and walked out of the courtroom as if I were a stranger. Outside, reporters swarmed, microphones flashing. Nora, any comment? Do you have a message for your family? I pushed past them, barely hearing the words. Later, when I got home, I stood in the quiet of my apartment and realized what the fight had really cost me. I had protected the company, yes, but I had buried the last fragile thread between mother and daughter. The Fairmont stood taller than ever, but the family name carved into its cornerstone now felt like a tombstone. And maybe, in some way, it was. That night, I walked through the hotel's empty lobby, the chandeliers glowing softly above. I thought about all the stories people would tell about us. The Hales, the feud, the lawsuit. They'd talk about greed and betrayal, about power and pride, but they'd never know the small truths. The smell of my mother's perfume in my childhood room, the way her laugh used to fill a house that never felt like home, or the way I once built an empire trying to prove I was nothing like her. I paused beneath the grand staircase, the marble cool under my hand. The Fairmont had started as a dream we pretended was shared. Now it was mine alone, completely, irrevocably mine. The price of that freedom was everything else. As I turned off the last set of lights, the lobby fell into shadow, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. Just a quiet, certain peace, the kind that comes when you've lost what you love and still stand, unbroken, among the ruins. It's strange the way peace begins, not with celebration, but with stillness. 3 months after the ruling, the city moved on. The tabloids stopped calling. The investors stopped whispering. The Fairmont expansion finished ahead of schedule, and the new wing opened with quiet applause and expensive champagne. Everyone smiled for photos, toasted my visionary leadership, and spoke as if the scandal had never happened. But I could feel the absence behind every polished moment. Like a shadow just outside the light. My mother hadn't called, not once. The last time I saw her was that day in court, pearls around her neck, eyes like glass. I told myself I didn't care, that I'd chosen freedom over family and would live with it. And most days I did. I filled my time with blueprints, late-night planning meetings, and a carefully maintained calm. But sometimes, when the elevator doors closed and I caught my reflection, eyes tired, jaw tight, I saw her face looking back. That scared me more than losing everything ever had. One evening, Layla came into my office, holding a letter. "This came to reception," she said softly. The envelope was cream-colored, the handwriting unmistakable. My mother's, though shakier than before. My first instinct was to throw it away, to avoid reopening old wounds. But I hesitated. Maybe I needed to know what was left of us. Inside, on a single sheet, she'd written, "I sold the house, moving south to stay with friends. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you'll remember that I once loved you." Even if I didn't know how to show it. I read it twice, then folded it carefully. No apology for the lies, no acknowledgement of the lawsuit. Just that line about love. I didn't cry, but something in me loosened, like a knot untying. I placed the letter in the top drawer of my desk, next to the company's founding documents. It didn't erase what she'd done, but maybe it meant she'd stop trying to win. And maybe, though I'd never admit it aloud, that was all I'd wanted from her. Weeks later, I found myself standing outside her old house, half out of curiosity, half out of something softer I didn't want to name. The windows were dark, the for sale sign gone. Through the gate, I could see the outline of the rose bushes she used to tend, now dry, untended, like the echoes of some old pride. I thought about all the battles that had been fought here, slammed doors, accusations, silence so thick it felt like another presence. For a moment, I wanted to go inside, to see if anything of me still lived there. The girl who dreamed at that kitchen table, who believed she could build something beautiful enough to make her mother proud. But the gate wouldn't open. Maybe it was better that way. I stood there for a long minute, the late sun turning everything golden, then whispered into the empty yard, "I'm sorry too. It wasn't for her, it was for me. For the years I spent trying to earn love that should have come freely." Then I walked away without looking back. The Fairmont became more than a hotel after that. It became my boundary, my beginning. I started spending nights in the penthouse suite, not because I had to, but because it felt like reclaiming something. From those high windows, the city spread out like a map of choices. Each light a place where someone was still trying, still surviving. I thought victory would taste like power, but it tasted like still water. Quiet, reflective, cleansing. Some nights, I'd walk through the lobby long after everyone had gone home, my heels echoing against marble, and I'd run my hand along the banister I'd designed. I'd think about the first time I showed Mom the sketches. How she'd smiled and said, "You get that precision from me." Maybe she was right. Maybe all along, we were mirrors, reflecting each other's ambition, each other's fear. She built walls with guilt. I built towers with proof. Both were fortresses in their own way. The only difference was, mine stood alone. A month after the house visit, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a nurse from a small coastal town hospital. My mother had been admitted after a mild stroke. She listed you as her emergency contact, the nurse said gently. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat felt full of every word we'd never said. I drove there the next morning, 4 hours south, along grey highways and salt-heavy air. When I entered her room, she looked smaller than I remembered. The woman who once commanded every room now seemed fragile, lost inside her hospital gown. Her eyes fluttered open, and when she saw me, she smiled faintly. "Nora," she whispered. "No bitterness, no sharpness. Just my name." I sat beside her, unsure what to do with my hands. "You should have called me," I said finally. "I didn't think you'd come," she murmured. "After everything." I looked at her then, really looked. The lines around her mouth, the trembling fingers, the faint echo of the woman who raised me on control instead of comfort. "I almost didn't," I said quietly. "But I guess we're both still here." We sat in silence after that, the kind that no longer needed words. When she passed 2 weeks later, I didn't cry at the funeral. There were only a handful of people there. Distant relatives, old friends, Mark, who couldn't even meet my eyes. The eulogies were soft, sanitized versions of her life. A dedicated mother, a fierce businesswoman, a woman who gave everything to her family. No one mentioned the lawsuit, the betrayal, the years of silence. Maybe that was mercy. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium and said, "My mother taught me how to build, not just walls or hotels, but endurance. She wasn't easy to love, but she made me strong enough to stand when everything else fell apart. And for that, I'll always be grateful." My voice didn't shake. When I sat down, Mark whispered, "She would have wanted that." I didn't answer. Outside, after it was over, I stood by her grave until everyone left. The headstone was simple. Linda Hale, 1958-2025. Loved fiercely. I placed a single white rose on the dirt, then turned toward the car. The wind off the ocean smelled clean, unburdened. For the first time in years, I felt something close to forgiveness. Not for her, but for myself. Now, when I walk through the Fairmont, people greet me with respect, even admiration. They call me resilient, visionary, unstoppable. But those words don't mean much anymore. What matters is the quiet. The peace that comes when the fight is over. When you no longer have to prove anything. Sometimes, in the evenings, I sit by the lobby fountain and listen to the water, thinking about all that's gone. The house, the noise, the ache of being misunderstood. The Fairmont stands tall outside the window, golden under the city lights, its reflection stretching across the glass like memory. It's beautiful, yes, but not because it's mine. Because it survived. Because I did. My mother once told me that legacy is what people remember when you're gone. I think she was wrong. Legacy is what you learn to live with after the people who hurt you can't hurt you anymore. And as the lights dim across the lobby, I whisper one last truth to myself. Quiet, certain, and final. I built this life from ruin. And for the first time, I'm finally free.